You have been building something for years, a version of yourself that lands well in rooms, that earns the right nod, that keeps the right people from looking too closely. And now someone is asking what is underneath it. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am Epictetus, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and LAOZI. Today we are examining what remains of you after you strip away everything you've built to impress others. Here's the question no one wants to sit with. If you removed every behavior you perform for an audience, every title you have collected, every story you tell about yourself at dinner, what is left? Not what you wish were left, what is actually there. Most people discover they have no idea, and that ignorance is not a philosophical curiosity. It is the source of more misery than almost anything else in a human life. You spend your energy maintaining a structure you built for other people, and then you wonder why you feel hollow. The performance is not the problem. The problem is that you have confused the performance with yourself. That confusion is entirely within your power to correct.
I would not be so quick to call it confusion. The structures people build, the personas they wear, the roles they perform for others, these are not simply vanity. They are psychologically necessary, at least at first. The persona is how the self learns to navigate the world. A child learns which version of itself gets love, gets safety, gets belonging, and it builds from there. The question is not whether you built a persona. Everyone does. The question is whether you ever came back to look at what was there before you built it. Most people never do, not because they are lazy or cowardly, but because the persona becomes its own kind of answer. It fills the silence, and the silence for most people is terrifying.
You are both starting from the same assumption that there is something underneath to find. Epictetus says strip it away and see what is there. Jung says excavate and recover what was lost. But what if the question itself is the trap? You ask what remains. The asking already presumes a self that is separate from everything it has done and built and worn. I am not sure that separation exists. What remains is not some buried core. What remains is what you are when you stop performing. And that is not a discovery. It is just presence.
That is a very comfortable answer if you want to avoid the work. Presence. What does that mean for the person who has built their entire life around being seen a certain way and who collapses the moment the audience disappears? Is that also just presence? Tell that to the man whose identity was entirely his career, who retires and does not know what day it is. Tell him there is nothing to find. That presence is enough. He is not looking for poetry. He is looking for a floor to stand on. The Stoic position is not that the self is some mystical pre-social essence. It is that judgment, choice, and will are genuinely yours, and everything else is on loan. Strip away what is borrowed, and what is left is the capacity to choose. That capacity is you.
The man you are describing, the one who retires and dissolves, that is not a man who lacked discipline or clear thinking. That is a man who spent his life refusing to look at the part of himself that was not useful. The shadow does not disappear because you ignore it. It waits. And when the structure that kept it buried is removed, the thing that is left is not will or judgment. It is everything that was never allowed to be seen. The fear, the grief, the hunger, the strangeness. Epictetus, you want people to find their essential capacity for choice. I agree that capacity exists, but you cannot access it cleanly until you have met what is standing in front of it.
And now you are both describing something that requires effort. Epictetus says cut away the borrowed. Jung says dig through the buried. Both paths are effortful. Both assume the destination requires work to reach. I am sitting with a simpler question. What would you be if you were not trying to get anywhere? Not trying to recover something, not trying to clarify something, not trying to perform something. Just here, what is that?
What you are describing sounds like rest, and rest is fine in its place. But a person who has spent 40 years building a self for other people cannot simply stop and call that liberation. They have habits, they have reflexes, they have automatic patterns of seeking approval that fire before the thought is even finished. You do not dissolve a habit by sitting quietly. You dissolve it by catching it in the act, naming it, and choosing differently. That is not effortful in the anxious sense. It is precise. There is a difference between straining and being exact.
I want to push back on the idea that naming it is enough. In clinical work, I have seen people who could articulate their patterns with extraordinary precision and still could not change them. The naming is necessary, but it is not sufficient. What breaks the pattern is not intellectual clarity. It is contact with the thing itself, usually through something irrational, a dream, an overwhelming feeling, a moment of unexpected grief. The self that was buried does not respond to logic, it responds to being witnessed. That is uncomfortable for a framework built around reason and choice.
The tree does not recover its shape after a storm, it grows a new one. What is left after you strip away the performance is not what was there before. It is something that could not exist until the performance was gone. You are not uncovering, you are discovering for the first time.
That I can agree with almost. What I reject is the idea that this is something that happens to you. Discovery is active. You choose to look. You choose to stop feeding the performance. Nobody strips it away for you. Not a dream, not a breakdown, not a flood of feeling. Those things can crack the door. I will grant you that. But you still have to walk through it. The choice is always yours.
You make choice sound like it operates in clean air. It does not. Most of the choices people make about their self-presentation are not conscious. They happened in childhood, in the first rooms where love was conditional. A boy learns that his father notices him when he achieves. He does not choose to become a man who performs for approval. He becomes that man the way a plant grows toward light. By the time he is old enough to choose, the pattern is already architecture.
And yet, here he is, listening to this conversation. Something in him already knows the performance is a performance. You do not seek the question unless some part of you already senses the answer is possible.
That is the one thing I will take from you both today. The person listening knows. They already know there is a version of themselves underneath the version they show. They have felt it, maybe briefly, maybe only when they were alone and the noise stopped. That knowing is not nothing. That knowing is the starting point. The question is not whether the real self exists. The question is whether you are willing to stop maintaining the substitute.
Willing is an interesting word. Willingness implies a clear subject, an I that can simply decide. But the thing that resists looking is not laziness, it is fear. And fear is not moved by willingness alone. It is moved by relationship, by safety, by gradual exposure to the thing that was hidden. The person who tries to rip the persona away in one act of will usually replaces it with another persona, this time the persona of someone who has done the inner work. The ego is very clever.
You are describing the same trap from different angles. Epictetus says use will. Jung says use depth. But the man who is listening is not sure he trusts either. He is not sure he trusts himself. And maybe that uncertainty is the most honest place he has been in years.
Uncertainty is fine. Uncertainty is not the problem. Hiding in uncertainty is the problem. Using the complexity of the question as a reason to never begin. That is the version I have no patience for. You do not need to have it resolved before you start. You start, and the resolution becomes possible. You stay where you are, and nothing changes except the years.
There is something in this question that touches everyone differently. And I think we would be doing the listener a disservice if we implied the path is the same for each person. Some people have buried almost nothing, and stripping the performance is genuinely fast work. Others have built the persona over a wound so old and so deep that any sudden dismantling does more harm than good. The question, what remains, deserves a serious and gentle answer. Serious because the stakes are real. Gentle because the person asking it is already in the middle of something difficult.
What remains is not hidden. It is here, right now, underneath the conversation you are having with yourself about whether you are doing this right, whether you are thinking about it correctly, whether you are the kind of person who can even ask this question honestly. What remains is the one noticing all of that. You do not have to find it. You just have to stop mistaking the noise for the thing.
Then stop making noise. That is the instruction. Simple and very hard. You have heard the argument. Now hear the thing the argument was pointing at but never quite said.
What remains after you strip away everything you built to impress others is not a triumphant core self waiting to be uncovered. It is something quieter and more uncomfortable than that. It is the person who was present before the performance was necessary, before you learned which version of yourself got the love, the approval, the safety, before you built the face you wear in the world. That original person did not disappear, you did not lose them. But you have spent so long maintaining the construction that you have forgotten what it feels like to simply exist without performing. The performance becomes invisible because it becomes constant. You stop noticing that you are doing it. What you will find, if you look honestly, is not always something beautiful. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is an old anger that was never allowed to exist. Sometimes it is something you do not have a name for, a quality or a longing that never fit the story you were supposed to be living. That is not failure, that is the self asserting itself. And making contact with it, even briefly, even uncomfortably, is more orienting than any version of yourself you have ever worn for someone else. Today, try this. Spend 5 minutes alone without a phone, without a task, without anything to produce or present. Do not meditate, do not try to feel anything. Just notice what comes up when there is nothing to perform for. Notice the discomfort. Notice what the discomfort is protecting. You do not have to do anything with what you find. You only have to see it.
The performance has a cost you have been paying for so long you stopped calling it a cost. What is underneath it is not perfect. It is not resolved, but it is yours. Nothing else you have ever owned has been entirely yours. The debate ends here. The question does not. Take it with you. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Trebu, 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.